Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. These notes are based on my medical records, my own recollections of the event, and descriptions provided by my family and medical team after 2 years of follow-up treatment and neurological rehabilitation. The medical professionals and my family confirmed the feelings and sounds I heard as events that occurred or that they could recall mentioning. In June 2014, I was admitted to the hospital with probable meningitis after exhibiting some of the symptoms of the condition, following what was initially assumed to be a terrible cold. I have a pretty solid medical background with no serious difficulties in the past. I was really agitated about the matter and was not getting very good responses from the medical professionals in the hospital after feeling pretty poorly for several days. They chose to sedate me and transport me to the intensive care unit. A cerebral swelling, considered to be caused by encephalitis, was discovered. As a result, they kept me sedated with propofol. Unfortunately, I developed propofol infusion syndrome as a result of this medication. My muscular fibers were destroyed as a result, and the uric acid buildup caused kidney difficulties. Because I was also intubated and using an artificial respirator, the stress on my body became so high that I developed low blood pressure and significant pulse changes. It appears that the blood pressure medications I was given also caused my heart to race. They then gave me more medicines to slow my heart, which caused my blood pressure to drop. They were also performing lumbar punctures and administering medications to address what they believed was the onset of meningitis. Throughout this moment, I could hear and feel where I was. The intubation tube gave me a really unpleasant sensation. I experienced intense dreams and experiences from the minute I was medicated, which I spent weeks documenting. I was feeling nauseous, so I knew something wasn't right. But I couldn't wake up like I can when I'm sleeping. I could hear my pulse and assumed I was talking to my wife about why I couldn't wake up. The nurses could be heard urging her to leave. The continual beeping noises from the medicine pumps and the related alerts were also audible. There was a lot of noise and action going on. My wife informed me that practically all of the on-call doctors were treating me. She later informed me that they had warned her that things were not looking good and that I might die. I was coughing hysterically since the intubation tube had also created a lung infection. Later, I was told that I had a chest infection and that they needed to tickle my lungs internally to promote coughing so that I did not acquire pneumonia. I got into a strange trance. I could see the entire room as though I were gazing down on myself in the bed, with all of the doctors and nurses around me. It was really busy. I was wondering why on earth I wasn't waking up when a maelstrom, like a storm, whipped up. I found myself in a small sailing dinghy in the middle of a huge storm. I was frantic to find out why I couldn't maneuver the boat. The tiller seemed to be battling me, and the rudder was simply too difficult to operate on the rough seas. I was anxiously attempting to navigate the dinghy back to shore so I could see my wife and 2 children. They were all crying and hugging each other, and my wife was pleading with me to hurry back to shore, telling me that they needed me. The sea between the boat and the shore was choppy, and it appeared impossible to return. On the other hand, the water on the other side was calm. The sea was fairly quiet, and there were faint silhouettes of people in the distance and on the horizon. I was feeling I knew these people. My mother's voice told me not to be afraid and to go to the calmer water. She was like a mist moving in the direction of the silhouettes on the horizon. But there was also my grandfather's voice supporting me and telling me that I could do it. I had trouble accepting what my mother's voice was saying because she was a devout Christian. It was as if I shouldn't trust her, as if she was making everything too easy for me, almost as if she was selfishly stealing me away from my family. I did, however, have faith in my grandfather. He was straightforward, upbeat, and assured, and he kept telling me that I could return to my family. He kept telling me to look at them and understand how much they needed me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't maneuver this dinghy, and I felt increasingly drawn to the horizon. It seemed like taking the gentler, calmer water would be a huge comfort. It felt very tempting to simply let go of the tiller, knowing that this would send the dinghy into a calmer horizon. The wind was making it impossible to return to shore, and my family seemed to be getting further and further away as the dinghy was pushed towards the calmer water. I recognized the shadows as my nanny and other family and friends who had died. There was no sense of anguish, rage, or anything else, simply a really peaceful atmosphere where they were. I was about to give up and submit to the overpowering sense of hopelessness when something triggered and a great sense of love for my family washed over me. My heart felt like it was about to burst. This was a sensation I don't believe I've ever had in my life. I was clutching the tiller tightly, determined to get back to shore. Suddenly, I zoomed over the boat, looking down at the boat as it drifted off towards the horizon, and then the entire image went dark, and the next part was much scarier. I was now only a foggy figure, virtually without definition, surrounded by one or two additional columns of mist. I had a feeling these columns of mist were other people in my situation. There was a low-level barrier in front, similar to a white picket fence, but it was too little to be useful because it could simply be stepped over. On the opposite side, I became aware of a powerful presence. It looked like a hooded figure, but I couldn't make out a face. It had no shape other than a dark column. I was a light column, thus I perceived this column to be the polar opposite of me. I had a feeling it was death coming for me. I didn't have to say anything since it was almost as if he was telling me telepathically that he was here for me and was getting closer. It wasn't frightening in the traditional sense of death. It was just menacing and appeared confidently powerful enough to convince me to follow him. Although it was only a dark figure, I had the impression it was male. I was resolute about not going with him and informed him I was not going anywhere with him. Despite being terrified and wondering if he possessed any greater power, I was virtually shouting at him telepathically. I kept repeating that I was not going with him, despite the fact that he was now floating over the short fence and getting closer and closer until he was nearly in front of me. I stood my ground and refused to be intimidated, even though it seemed like a given conclusion. The presence then darted to the right of me, and I observed it, as well as another white presence, travel off to the left into a darker emptiness. Despite the fact that the setting was already dark, I had the impression that everything was closing in on me. I had a vision of being alone on a boat, rather than a dinghy this time. I was now in the hold of a fishing trawler, surrounded by fish, feeling damp, extremely cold, sick, and forlorn. There was no one else on the boat, and different plaques riveted to the metal walls gave instructions on how things functioned. At this time, I was wondering if I'd given up everything. I felt a dreadful sensation of hopelessness and solitude wash over me, and I was sad. I thought I had done something good by defeating death and avoiding the nothingness. So why was I alone on a boat, completely alone? I kept floating above it and realizing that this boat, like the dinghy, was in the middle of the ocean with nothing around it. The sense of being trapped on the boat lasted for what felt like days, until everything turned hazy and white. Then I found myself in another series of dreams. I was sedated, or intentionally comatose, for 10 days in total. I finally awoke after getting a tracheostomy to avoid the irritation caused by the intubation tube. This was what was preventing the medics from resuscitating me. I later found that I'd been given the largest amount of sedatives imaginable, but they couldn't figure out why I was still fighting the tube. My heart had stopped twice after racing to more than 110 beats per minute, and my blood pressure had dropped to less than 20. MRI scans eventually revealed that the brain inflammation was caused by Cobb-Fleming syndrome, a spasm in blood cells that momentarily shut down my brain. I recalled and felt the entire incident after having the tracheostomy a week later. I actually felt a lot better and realized I could make sense of the strange dreams and get better, albeit I still felt trapped in my inability to awaken myself. When my assigned nurse realized I didn't appreciate the ruckus when they were trying to get me out of sedation, I came around. She gradually reduced the sedative amount on the medicine pump until I awoke gently, finally able to breathe for myself after the tracheostomy.